The recording is paused now. Okay, friends, we're going to start the program now, and we'll start as we normally do with reciting Namo Tassa and the three refuges for those who like to do that. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dhammang saranang gacchami, Sanghang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Dutiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Buddhang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Dhammang saranang gacchami, Tatiyampi Sanghang saranang gacchami. So welcome, friends, to this Wednesday night Sutta class. And so tonight we are carrying on with look at the path of the 7 purifications. And last week we covered the Rata Vinita Sutta, which mentioned this path of the 7 purifications kind of in brief, and mentioned them as in the analogy or simile of a relay of chariots, or using more modern lingo, the Pony Express. Well, maybe that's not so modern anymore, but people probably know the Pony Express more than the. So that each of these stages of purification is used to as a kind of a prerequisite, or to reach the next level of mental purification. So these are purifications of the mind and body, of the obstructions that block our ability to see the truth, and to keep the mind caught in the web of repeated karmic actions and the repetition of the cycle of samsara. So I hope you are able to read, especially the attachment that I sent out last week on the insight knowledges. But I wanted to go over a little bit before we get into the actual 8 insight knowledges, just to review a little bit about the 7 purifications. Now, the first one is the purification of sila, or the purification of virtue. And this basically, it means by observing the 5 precepts or even more precepts of people that you follow the 8 precepts, or even the monastics that might be following 10 precepts, or the monastic vows. But for lay people, which means most of you out there, it means a minimum of trying to live by the 5 precepts. It's because without following and guiding one's life by the guidelines of 5 skillful behaviors, or the abstaining from the 5 negative behaviors, that the mind won't be able to settle down and to gain any real deeper concentration. So the purification of sila is considered a prerequisite for reaching the purification of the mind. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to perfect your practice of the sila, the 5 precepts, or 8 precepts if you're taking those. But at least you have to somehow calm down the wanton and automatic reactive habits of the body and mind, especially in terms of doing those kind of actions that would go against the harmony of being in harmony with the law of karma, in harmony with the laws of nature. So basically, the purification of sila is the transformation of those negative karmic actions of greed, hatred, and delusion. And the purification of mind, or chitta visuddhi, refers to gaining the various levels of concentration. So at the very minimal, that would be being able to gain a momentary concentration if you're practicing mindfulness, or the excess concentration if you're practicing more the concentration techniques, or the full jhanas. So purification of mind actually means the attainment of the jhanas, first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana, and then even the formless jhanas for those that might be trying to pursue that route of the extreme, very higher levels of concentration, but those are not really needed. Usually the purification of mind means attaining at least one of the 4 jhanas, and ideally the 4th jhana. But even being able to reach access concentration, or the first jhana, is considered to be at least the lower levels of purification of the mind. And that is because that weakens the hindrances. And so again, most of our hindrances are caused by not observing sila, or breaking the, living out of harmony with the law of karma, and therefore incurring these negative types of speech and actions and karmic results that will keep our mind full of the hindrances, or being affected by the hindrances that block our concentration. So that's the main purpose of the purity of mind, is to overcome the 5 hindrances so that the mind can become very concentrated and clear. And so we reach that purity of mind by practicing mindfulness. One has to practice mindfulness first in order to be aware of one's thoughts and actions, to be able to let go of the negative thoughts, and be able to gain that mental tranquility. Now, the third of the purifications is the purification of view. So now in the purification of mind, one is already practicing mindfulness and concentration, and one is probably getting insights, but the purification of view specifically is oriented toward understanding the 5 aggregates, and which we've already covered, and I gave a specific, actually, a Dhamma talk on that on I think on Monday night on another YouTube or Zoom channel, but we've covered them quite a lot in the past, the 5 aggregates. So the aggregates of our body and mind, basically. And they're all the activities of our body and mind. And so basically understanding how these 5 aggregates are in constant change and flux or impermanent. And because of that, if we try to cling on to them and they change, then we get disappointed and we sort of suffer on account of that, or the clinging to these 5 aggregates brings a lot of problems and pain and downright suffering. That means clinging to the form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Because they're always changing, we can't control them. That is why we get frustrated and mentally, have so many problems. And also clinging to them as myself. So the 5 aggregates, the characteristic of the 5 aggregates is that they're all impermanent and constantly changing, as we've already talked about many times in the past. And because of that, they cannot be a source of any lasting type of happiness. Sure, they bring temporary, maybe some pleasurable feelings, but those feelings change, and then we have to go on chasing more pleasurable feelings to think we have to be happy by having all the pleasurable feelings brought through the senses. So these 5 aggregates, as we've already learned, we're not really the owner or controller of them. And they don't have any independent existence. And we've covered this already quite a lot in the past. But so it's, that's the view, the ditthi. So the purifying that view, because that's the most difficult thing, understanding these 5 aggregates as anicca, dukkha, and anatta. And really through insights, by getting insights into these as you meditate, you can see how these things basically are coming and going. These 5 aggregates and all the 6 senses are coming and going kind of under their own power. And through the power of past habits and conditionings. And, when you're really deeply examining it, we're not really controlling much, because everything is just a very intricate and deep-rooted electromagnetic circuits and neurons and habitual patterns that keep getting recreated and replay through our body, mind, and senses all the time. So it takes a lot of meditation, and especially the vipassana type of insight meditation and following the 4 foundations of mindfulness that bring this view. So the nama rupa, understanding that the mind and matter, or nama rupa, form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness, are under the sway or undergoing these, their characteristic are these 3 characteristics of anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So when one has really understood that, at least even on an intellectual level, that is called the when you kind of accept that, yes, these are, anicca, dukkha, anatta. Now, the fourth purity is the overcoming doubts. Now, even though we might think these five aggregates, because people think, oh, the aggregates, yeah, they're anicca, dukkha, and anatta. But then when it comes down to the aggregate of consciousness, they might be able to let go of form, feeling, perception, and volition as not being oneself. But it's the aggregate of consciousness which people cannot easily let go of. And so especially that aggregate of consciousness, understanding the no self characteristic of that. And so a lot of people still have doubts about it. They think they don't have doubts, but, especially about the form, feeling, perceptions, and volitions. And they might think, well, I don't think I have a self, but, it still seems like there is one. So, people still have doubts. And this doubt about the existence of a self, and there's different ideas about it, whether this self is eternal and it's going to last forever, or it's going to be annihilated when you die. The sense of self and I will just poof and disappear, and there'll be nothing left. So this is the way that, basically the materialistic view, or, maybe atheists and so on. I don't want to label people necessarily, but the belief that when you die, there's nothing left over, and, and so on, and nothing carries over. So that's one extreme view. And the other is that the sense of I will vanish and it will never arise again. And the other one is that this self or I will go to a heaven and live for eternity in some heaven world, or maybe in a hell, or some other realms. So people still have doubts, may have doubts about that. So the purification of overcoming the doubts, and the doubt is mainly about the sense of self, but it's also doubt about whether the ability to attain enlightenment, or there's even such a state as enlightenment or liberation. Some people, even some Buddhists, maybe might have some doubts about that, or doubts about themselves, thinking, oh, I don't think I can ever attain that. That's too much, and doubts about their ability to progress in meditation. So people sometimes use that as an excuse not to really try, or to give it their best shot, and they just think, well, I'll never be able to attain anything. And so they might want to just hope to be reborn in a heaven world, because there are some Buddhists who believe that it's impossible to attain enlightenment even in this lifetime, because there's too much sin in the world. And so they're hoping to be reborn in the future with the future Buddhas, and maybe at that time they would be able to do that. So doubting that you can do that even in this lifetime is also a doubt, because if you have that doubt, you're not going to give the full, you're always going to be holding back a little bit. So this purification of overcoming doubts is a very important step also. And basically it means reviewing the paticca samuppada. Now, I hope you've been able to read some of the Visuddhimagga, the details about some of these different stages of purity. And so the purification of view is reviewing and going over the five aggregates over and over and over again to understand them. And then the overcoming doubts is part of the also the understanding paticca samuppada, and the process of birth and death, and understanding the past, present, and future lives. Now, a lot of people have doubts about rebirth. Even some Buddhists, downplay this idea about rebirth. from lifetime to lifetime, the external rebirth, as I mentioned. And so to overcome those purity of overcoming doubts is by reviewing the paticca samuppada in forward and reverse order, and understanding how our actions and karmic and sankharas from the past has given rise to this new consciousness in being in the present. It's not the same being, but it's not entirely other also. So the actions and karmic seeds from the past carry on to this present life. And if we continue to accumulate more and more karma in this present life, when you die and you still have greed, hatred, and delusion in the mind, then it will carry over into the future life. And so overcoming the doubts about that through contemplating again the paticca samuppada over and over again in forward and reversed order, that is a way that one can overcome these doubts, and would also overcome any doubt whether the Buddha was fully enlightened or so on. So once one has overcome those doubts, then all along as you're going through this process, your concentration is getting better and better and deeper. And then the fifth of these purifications is the purification of knowing what is the wrong path and what is the right path. Now, by the time you reach, overcome the doubts and purify the view and overcome the doubts, then you're, as I just mentioned, your mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom is getting quite deep, and especially your concentration also. And you can start seeing, nimittas, and you can have some certain type of experiences that could lead you to think that, oh, you're getting close to enlightenment, or you get attached. So I think we all know that, when you gain concentration and you overcome the hindrances, sometimes you can see light in the mind. You might see a little nimitta, which is like a little star in the mind, and that light could even grow much brighter. Or you could feel sensations of extreme bliss or euphoria, or you could even think that you were able to read somebody's mind. And there's a lot of other what we call ornaments, trinkets of meditation, or frills and thrills, you might say, like the extreme bliss, feelings that you're floating, feelings of the body disappearing, again, like even these bright, the light that can come into the mind. And a lot of people could think they've attained enlightenment, or they've reached the end. And actually that is the case, because all the monks that the Buddha meditated with, in his lifetime, they attained all these formless jhanas, and they took these formless jhanas, the infinite light, their mind would be filled with infinite light or infinite consciousness, and they thought, oh, that's God, that's the supreme self, that's it, I'm liberated. And the Buddha saw that, well, even though it's a very exalted state, they weren't liberated. And so on. So anyway, the getting attached to these kind of states is considered to stagnate the mind and to delay your progress in meditation. So one has to understand that that's not the real goal of meditation, is just to fill your mind with bright light or have these other euphoric experiences, or even out of the body experience, or there's so many experiences you can gain in meditation, but they're not really that experience of transcending the ego consciousness. And actually a person's ego consciousness can get stronger if they think that they've attained enlightenment when actually they haven't. So understanding that just gaining the jhanas, but without developing wisdom, that's not, the right path. So one has to not get stuck in the jhanas and all those other euphoric experiences that can come with them, and to get back on the path of insight and developing insight and developing the the 7 factors of enlightenment. So following the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and using the mindfulness of the body to reach the mindfulness of feelings, the mindfulness of the mind states, and then the mindfulness of Dhamma. That's really the practice of what is considered to be the path to, enlightenment, or the right path. So you coming to that understanding, because a lot of people get stuck in these levels of concentration, and because the joy and the happiness and the other experiences are so pleasurable, they don't want to really go on to develop, to see the anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So it's what I call the trap of tranquility. So one has to understand that that's a trap, and to get on to the pure development of mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, especially the wisdom and the 7 factors of enlightenment. Now, so once one has avoided the trap of the tranquility, and then using that tranquility for developing the insight into the emptiness of the 5 aggregates, to the impermanence and suffering and no self nature, the 5 aggregates, then one is considered to be on the right path. And then this comes to the 6th of these purifications. And this is what I wanted to start going into more detail this evening, and we're going to continue that probably for another week or 2, because there's a lot in that. So this 6th stage of the purification is called the purification of the way, knowledge and vision of the purification of the way. So the way refers to that right path that I just mentioned, the way of developing the enlightenment factors, the 7 factors of enlightenment, which you develop as you're practicing the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and especially the Dhammanupassana. The 4th foundation of mindfulness, the Dhammanupassana, is really the beginning of this the knowledge and vision of the way. And the first of these, so there's 8 insight knowledges that are that I sent out the link to that, and these are described in detail, even though in the suttas they're not described in too much detail, but in the Visuddhimagga they're described in very much detail. So these the first of the 8 insight knowledges is called the insight into rise and fall. And so this actually means the impermanence, gaining a deeper insight into impermanence. So impermanence refers to the rise and fall, seeing how each moment of sensory experience just arises and vanishes very quickly. And so all these 5 aggregates, so the material vibrations, the feelings, the perceptions, the volitional formations, that means all the thoughts and memory and urges and ideas that are going through the mind, these are all bundled into this category of volitional formations. Sometimes it's called mental formations. and the consciousness. And I've already talked about this in other talks too. And especially the consciousness, because the consciousness is what is aware of the other four aggregates. So the four aggregates, the material vibrations, the pleasant and painful sensations, even the neutral sensations, the perceptions, that means the recognitions or names and labels of the different sensory objects, and the memories about them, the thoughts of the past and future connected with everything that you've seen, heard, smelled, tasted, touched, and thought about. These are, in our memory, in the unconscious mind. And they're also, being recreated all the time. But it's the consciousness that's aware of them. So we're aware of form, feeling, perception, and volition. These are the activities that are actually, undergoing the impermanence, and so does the consciousness. Now, so it's tuning into that. So this first insight knowledge, it means you deliberately tune your attention into noticing how quickly the different sensations and feelings and thoughts, and the six senses, even sounds. So when you're meditating, you feel, the breath coming and going. Actually, the breathing is like the training wheels for rise and fall. So it's a gradual process of developing the insight into rise and fall using the Satipatthana method. It starts out with, the anapanasati, that means the mindfulness of breathing. So you deliberately tune into how the breath arises. It lasts a second or two, and then it stops. So you deliberately tune into the in-breath. That's the rise of the breath. And the fall is the out-breath. So you're seeing how the breath rises up. 1 or 2 seconds, you feel the expanding in-breath, and then it stops. So that's the fall of the in-breath. And then the start of the out-breath is the rise of the out-breath, the contracting out-breath, and then you follow that down to the end when the out-breath stops. And that is the fall, the stopping. So basically, the rise and fall means starting and stopping, or beginning and the end. So you tune in to the beginning of the in-breath, and whether you're focusing on the tip of the nose or you're focusing on the expanding and contracting of the abdomen, it's easier to watch it there. And so you try to notice that moment the breath arises and when it stops, it begins and ends. And then the out-breath begins and ends. And so you deliberately tune into that. It's like a scientist looking through a microscope, and he deliberately wants to watch something, how cells and red and white blood cells interact, or other things. So he knows what he wants to look for, and so he pays specific attention to that. So that's how we're training in Vipassana meditation. Again, beginning with the breathing. And so you see the beginning and end of the in-breath, and then the beginning and end of the out-breath. And in the beginning, so you're practicing anapanasati just to see the beginning and end of each breath, and you're focusing on that until it becomes very clear. But even while you're focusing on that, you can feel other sensations coming and going too in the body. So gradually you open up. As you're able to hold that attention to the breathing and seeing how the in-breath comes and goes, the out-breath comes and goes, then you might notice a little itch on your face that came and go. came and went, or you might feel a little body jerk like that arose and vanished. So these things are going on there in the background, because whenever you gain concentration, you're able to see many things going on basically at the same time. Because you let go of that focus only on the breathing and you open up the field of attention to the larger body. And you start seeing how quickly the other, the four elements or the other sensations are coming and going. And you try to notice more and more. And then not only the body, but even while you're feeling sensations in the body, you'll hear sounds arise and vanish in the background. And, even a car noise going by, or a door slamming, your cat meowing, and you just see how quickly those things just arise and vanish. And so you pay specific attention to seeing how these sensations arise and vanish. But even as they're arising, they're also changing. So even in one breath, actually you can see many little sensations of expansion arising and vanishing, sort of that fast actually. Even in a 1 or 2 second in-breath, you can feel many little movements of the rib cage and of that expanding movement, and also in the contracting movement. So what used to be one impermanence, you can see several impermanences within one movement, or even a sound. Like you might say, oh, Bhante is talking now, but each syllable is rising and vanishing. So just in that, there was at least 12 or 15 rise and falls you could have seen if you were not looking at my face and just hearing the sound. And each of those syllables is a separate arising and vanishing. But normally we speak too fast, or we move like this, you don't see the arising and vanishing. But if I went like this, there's arising and vanishing, 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 arising and vanishing. But normally we don't move that slow to see it, but actually that's how it's occurring in the brain, and so on. So anyway, I know it's complicated, but this is a very powerful way of developing that insight into impermanence. So you have to start out slowly, and then so it starts out with the breathing, and once you can clearly see how the breath, that arising and vanishing of the in-breath, the rising and vanishing of the out-breath, and then other sensations, that are maybe coming and going, even the pulse of blood in the body, the heartbeat, you can see how each of those heartbeats is arising and vanishing, or the pulse of blood in the arteries, or other little prickling sensations. And you'll be amazed at how many things you can notice, because the body is basically just millions, billions of cells that are in constant vibration. And you can feel a lot of them if the mind is clear and open. And then also you see your thoughts. Even while you're contemplating, thoughts will try to come up in the mind, but if your mindfulness is very quick, the thought will also just disappear very quickly. As soon as you notice that you're thinking, it'll stop, it'll vanish. If you've developed that connection to the body and are well grounded in the body, it's very difficult to stay lost in your thoughts. So you're training yourself to just notice a thought, how quickly even a thought or an urge, especially an urges to want to move, or even the urge to think, you start to see how quickly those thoughts just arise and vanish if we don't cling to them. That's the thing. Normally we're clinging and identifying these 5 aggregates. That's why they seem to be lasting in something real or solid. And that's why the purification of view is very important. Without attaining that purification of view, you probably are not going to gain success in developing the insight into rise and fall or impermanence. So that's the first insight knowledge. And it goes very, very deep. And basically, in just a short period of time, if you're well concentrated, usually in most meditations, our body sensations and sounds and thoughts are the three most common sensory impingements that we have. Unless you're in a kitchen or somewhere, there's not too many smells or not too many tastes. But if your eyes are closed, then there's not too many visible vibrations. But of course, sometimes they do arise in the meditation when you're sitting with the closed eyes, of course. But especially the sensations, thoughts, and sounds. The idea is you actually try to speed up that rate of perception. You try to, as the mind gets quieter and quieter, you'll notice subtler and subtler sounds, subtler and subtler thoughts going through the mind, subtler and subtler body sensations. And that's what needs to happen to really develop at a very deep level this perception of impermanence. But ideally, all the six senses, even in one meditation, you'll be able to see how, what we call our living life, what we call our mind is just made up of these mind moments of hearing, seeing, tasting, smelling, touching, and thinking that are just arising and vanishing very quickly if we're not clinging. If you're clinging, you won't see it, but you won't see it a deep way. But when you have developed that level of momentary concentration or access concentration, or even the first jhana concentration, if you're not getting absorbed in that, then you'll be able to see this rising because you're not clinging anymore and the hindrances have subsided. So the mind becomes very, very clear. Most people's minds are not clear. Most people have never probably experienced a really clear mind unless they meditate. So anyway, so the idea is to you speed up this rate of perception to be able to notice more and more sensations. You don't give the mind time to cling on to one particular sensation because there's always something else that you can notice coming and going. And it's not you have to look, where is this? No, they'll naturally appear in the mind without doing anything. If your mind is clear, it becomes like a mirror. When you look in a mirror, you don't really have to look for anything in the mirror. It just is naturally reflected. So the same with the mind when the five hindrances subside. So that's why the five hindrances subsiding are a prerequisite for attaining this knowledge of rise and fall. And that's why all these different things are connected. And this is also important to understand that the sense of self is directly connected to the amount of attention and clinging and identification we're giving to any of these five aggregates or any of the six sense objects that are coming through the senses. And as long as we're reacting and clinging and identifying with these aggregates, then the sense of self will appear to be real. We won't see the rise and fall of the sense of I. But even in meditation, even the idea of the I, me, and mine is also, we can see these urges arise in the mind and they also come and go when you're thinking about things and identifying the past or future. You see that ego consciousness in there. But when you have tuned in to the flow of impermanence, then there's no time for the mind to drag in the past and the future connected with any particular object of memory. And therefore, the sense of I also starts to fade away. And so you start to understand how even the sense of self arises and passes away with the amount of attachment or identification we're giving to any of these five aggregates. And you can begin to see the illusion of the ego when you develop this sense of tune in to the flow of the rise and fall, the flow of impermanence. And so this, in Vipassana meditation, it's a particular technique, and you have to specifically focus on it, and you have to specifically cultivate this perception of impermanence if you want to be following really the foundations of mindfulness, and especially of the Dhammanupassana, and developing the factors of enlightenment. And this, so the attention to the rise and fall builds up to an incredible speed into where the next insight knowledge is actually called the knowledge of falling, or just cessation, bhanga. And that means that, like the different sensory stimulations coming through your senses, it's like shooting stars. If you ever watched a meteor shower and you're looking up in the sky and all you see is just the last tail of a meteor just vanishing. You don't even see where it came from. You just see it just, so quickly. That is called the vanishing. You're seeing that, you don't even see how things arise. You just see the vanishing because they arise instantaneously. And so then you just pay attention to how quickly things are just zipping through the senses. And then things will start to cease also, like the feelings of your body might disappear. The perception of the body might cease. So bhanga also refers to cessation. And then there's different levels of that. But you see how quickly the thoughts, feelings, sounds, smells it's just an incessant series of momentary moments just vanishing. And you'll be surprised at how many things you can notice. I mean, in the space of even 5 seconds, you can notice hundreds of sensations and so on arising, and especially vanishing, because really they arise and vanish instant, in a nanosecond. So, but it's because of our clinging we don't see the arising and vanishing, and so they go on doing this hundreds and thousands of times that fast, and we don't see it because the mind is dull and is clinging on to these things. So those first two insight knowledges, the knowledge of the rise and fall, and then that builds up to such a speed that all you're seeing is, it's like tracer bullets. I don't know if most of you haven't been in the military, probably, or fired a machine gun, but you might have seen movies, of tracer bullets. It's like that. They're just vanishing. You don't even see where it came from. They're just vanishing into nothingness. And that is the experience of bhanga, or the experience of the disappearing, how quickly things are just vanishing through the senses if you're not holy. And that's why one has to have that more advanced level of concentration to see this very clearly. And unfortunately, many people don't get to that level because it requires a great deal of practice, and usually it requires going on a retreat, specifically like a Vipassana style retreat for 2 or 3 weeks to develop the mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom to that level. Now, there's a lot in this, so I'm just going to stop here with these first 2 insight knowledges and continue on going over the rest of them in the following next week, or however long it takes in the next week or 2 or 3, because it's really a lot to this, and this is really important. A lot of people don't really get into this and study this. They think, oh, this is all, we don't need all that, but if you want to follow the Buddha's way, and especially the 4 foundations of mindfulness, then this is the path, and it's unmistakable that this is the way the Buddha explained it. But anyway, so I'm going to wind up this talk on this subject now. And if any of you have any questions, chat, we'll look in the chat box and see if there's anything going on there. This question: in the tranquility trap, one does lose the self. So why do you say it is not wisdom? You don't necessarily lose the self. It's just kind of going into abeyance, and the sense of self will only disappear in probably the formless jhanas. But you may not notice it, but it's still there, and it's just because you've also see the difference between just tranquility. Gaining tranquility means you're sort of forcing the mind to be quiet by concentrating on just one object. And then again, as those jhana factors arise, you get absorbed in that. And the sense of self, may go, recede, to the background, but it won't fully go away in most cases, or it may be very temporarily. But it's because you've removed all the distractions without understanding them. So it's not much difference in people taking tranquilizers, right? You can take a tranquilizer and also, you can become very tranquil, right? But that came from the tranquilizer. So you can concentrate on some objects and gain that tranquility, but you haven't done that in the midst of defilements. So the difference is in Vipassana meditation, you're gaining tranquility through overcoming the attachment to those things. And so by developing the ability to endure pains and to endure sounds and so on, you're not shutting out the world. In Vipassana meditation, you open up to the world, where in concentration, basically you're trying to shut it out by concentrating on just one object, absorbing your mind as some colored disc or the white light or whatever. You basically just blot out the rest of the senses. And it's, it could become like a hypnotic state. But in Vipassana, you're remaining fully conscious, and especially in this development of the impermanence. You're remaining conscious, even though the hindrances have subsided, but the mind becomes very clear and you're still observing things arising and vanishing.
Bhante, can I please ask you in continuation? I'm the one who had asked you that question. What is the difference between an extreme sense of tranquility when all thoughts stop and the first stage of jhana?
All thoughts don't stop in the first stage of jhana. There's applied and sustained thought. There's a limited amount of thought about your meditation subject. But other extraneous thoughts about the past and the future, of course, they subside. But, the hallmark of the first jhana is applied and sustained thought. Now, different teachers will give you different interpretations of what that means, but it does mean even metta, thinking metta, may all beings be well and happy. If you're just repeating a couple words and repeating it over and over again, you might, or even chanting a mantra, you could get in the first jhana with that, because the mental activity is very limited. But it means non-distracted thought, and so the mind is still very concentrated. So
Bhante, when all thoughts stop,
not necessarily. Only when you get up into, go beyond the first jhana, you go to the second jhana. But that doesn't mean, you're not observing and there's wisdom there. You can still contemplate. But this is a difference of opinion of different meditation masters and teachers, and that's why it's confusing for some people. Some people say, "Oh, you can't think at all in jhana." It's not true. You don't have the hindrances, and you're thinking only about the meditation subject. But because it's very clear that in the jhanas, you can contemplate impermanence and dukkha and no self as well. Anyway, this is something that unless you've reached those levels, it's difficult to understand. This next question, does consciousness, even though it is not permanent, because it's always changing, continue into the next transformation? Is rebirth consciousness, is an energy process? The consciousness is always rising and vanishing. The ego consciousness that has the ego with it, in the sense of I. Now, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, or an arhat, and they're still living in the body, they still have 5 aggregates. So they still have consciousness, and they still have, but it's also nibbana. It's called nibbana with the aggregates remaining. And there's no suffering there. So they call it awareness. It's called anidasana vijnana. It doesn't leave signs, and it doesn't create karma. Where the average unenlightened person's minds keep on creating karma because of their ignorance, greed, and delusion. But the Buddha has gone beyond all that, and his mind doesn't create karma. And so it says it doesn't leave any signs. The signs because of the clinging. And so when he dies, the mind is, that consciousness doesn't regroup. The aggregates don't regroup again. It's very difficult really to try to describe these things in words. So this question, by our clinging to one particular experience or sensation, we miss the rise and fall of other sensations which are occurring at the same time. Is that a correct assessment? Yes. But isn't the mind capable of only experiencing one thing at a time anyway? The full conscious experience, but if you're trying to identify the objects, then yes, only. But this process is happening at 10 to the 24 power times in the blink of an eye or a second, let's say. So crunch some numbers. How much is 10 to the 24 power? It's probably millions, right? So that experience is happening millions of times in a second. But so we can't notice that if we're clinging to them. That's why, you can't experience that if the mind is clinging to anything. And so but the mind can notice many things going on if it's not clinging, because it's not identifying any objects. Especially when you get up to that point of rising and vanishing, and you build up speed where things are just vanishing, you're not recognizing anything. That's why emptiness arises, because the mind doesn't have time to recognize anything. It's this recognition, and the ego, the subject-object recognition of things. That is what you can only recognize one thing at a time. But you're not recognizing anything when you build up to this rising and vanishing, because it's so fast. Says when arising and vanishing is happening, does each vanishing transmit something to the next arising, or they're totally independent? They're independent. If not independent, what transmits to the next arising? Well, actually, when something vanishes, then something else, because of force of habit, a new thing will arise, not the same thing, but there's a continuity there. And so when something is vanished, it's vanished, but another thing is going to arise in its place or immediately after that. And that can happen to that 10 to the 24th power number of times, millions of times in a second that has happened. So there's no way an average person is going to see that, or anybody really. So, except maybe a Buddha. But yeah, when something is vanished, then it totally vanishes. But because of the conditioning, the mind is, the next thing it'll arise again, so many times. But because we're clinging to it, we don't see that arising and vanishing. And it's the clinging that causes it to keep on lasting for a long time. But if we didn't have clinging, it would be gone. Now, you could hear a sound, and if you hear a sound, then normally you start thinking about it. But if you just, that first little sound, if you're hearing something out of your left ear, then the next moment hear something out of your right ear, you can't hear both of them at the same time. But they're going back and forth so quickly, millions of times in a second, that it appears that you are seeing multiple things at the same time. But actually, you're not when you get down to the nanosecond level. Anyway, again, this is very, very difficult to, for, people to understand unless they've reached a very, very, very deep level of, vipassana awareness. Okay, friends, I think we've gone over our time. So we're going to finish up this now, and we're going to take a short break. Thank you for your questions. Sorry if I couldn't answer them perfectly, but this is a very deep subject, and it's not easy to explain it, and just a short period of time or even explain it at all, really. Okay, so let's take a couple minutes break to use the restroom, and then we're going to do a few yoga stretches and then sit down for our meditation, okay? Oh, wait a minute, did I mute myself? Relax your arms and hands at the side. Gently close your eyes. Just feel your feet pressing the floor. Just try to feel the height and the weight of the body over the feet. And then begin some deep, slow breathing. Try to take 3 seconds to expand your abdomen, rib cage, and upper chest. Hold the air in the lungs a couple of seconds, and then slowly breathe out, feeling the last bit of air go out of the lungs. Just take a few more deep, slow breaths like that, cultivating this basic mindfulness. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, standing here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Okay, now on the next in-breath, raise the arms over the head, interlock the fingers, turn the palms up, straighten the arms, stretch your head back. On the out breath, turn the palms down and touch the top of the head. In in-breath, palms up, straighten the arms. Stretch the head back, arch your lower back a little bit. Feel the sensations. Out breath, touch the top of the head. The third time, hold that upward stretch longer. Feel the sensation. Release the fingers and the out breath, arms back to the side. Relax, close the eyes. Try to feel the increased pulsation or sensations in your fingers. And if you can't feel that, just feel your feet pressing the floor. Remember the present moment of standing. Standing. On the next in breath, push up on the toes and raise the arms over the head in this way, facing the hands toward each other and stretch. The out breath, arms back to the side, heels to the floor. Use the in breath to help lift up the body. In breath. Stretch. Out. In. Out. Relax. Just keep feeling the body. Close the eyes. Feel the subtle sensations. Feel where the clothing rubs against the skin. Subtle pulsation. Any other sensation. Just pay attention to the sensations. Change, come and go. Just let go of your thoughts. Let the thoughts come and go in the back of the mind. And next we'll do side bending. So on an in-breath, raise both arms up. You keep the fingers and arms straight, close to your head. On the out-breath, bend over the right side as far as you comfortably can. Keep the arms and hands parallel to each other like railroad tracks. In-breath, lift up. And next out-breath, the other side. Feel the stretch in the side. In-breath. Just keep alternating sides like that with the breathing out breath. Once more to each side. And the out breath, lower the arms. Just relax. Just close the eyes. Feel those subtle sensations, pulsations, especially in your hands and fingers. Feel where the clothing touches the skin on different places. Noticing each of those different places where the clothing touches the skin is also a different moment of consciousness arising and falling. Every time you notice a different sensation, thought that's arising and vanishing. Okay, now turn the hands outward. We're going to do backward and forward bending. Be careful with the back bend. Don't bend back too far the first time. So on an in-breath, raise the arms up and spread them out to the sides as you bend backwards. Keep the eyes open, look at the ceiling. And carefully lift up on an in-breath, keeping the arms out at the sides, and on the out-breath, lower the arms and hands down towards the ground. If you can touch the ground of the feet, keep the legs straight. And begin standing up, turn the palms outward again. Raise the arms up on the in-breath, up and out. Bend back. Lift up. Out breath. And the little bones in the lower spine stretch out. And standing up, palms outward, in breath. In breath, out breath. Now on an in-breath, standing up, bring the hands together at the chest, back to the sides. Feel the whole body. Feel that organic aliveness of the whole body, pulsating, vibrating, all those arising and vanishings, hundreds and thousands of them, all over the body. Okay, let's come back to our meditation place, seat. Okay, friends, let's try to sit straight. Try to align the spine and the back of the head in a straight line. Try to establish that the natural inward curve of the lower spine. And keep your chin lifted up, level, parallel with the floor. Gently close the eyes. Just rest your attention behind the eyes. Try to feel the eyes and the sockets and the eyelids stretched over the eyeball. And just slowly move the attention down to feel your shoulders. Relax the shoulders. Feel where the clothing touches the skin of the shoulders and arms, chest. Feel your hands and fingers touching. Try to feel the subtle pulse of blood in the fingers and hands. And feel where the buttocks press the seat. Try to feel the right and the left buttock pressing the seat. Feel that hardness, contact. And feel the way the legs and knees are bent and the feet underneath. Feel where the feet touch the floor, where they cross underneath. Try to feel the subtle sensations in your feet and toes. And just let the awareness kind of move back up again, upwards, up through the body. Again, just feel the hands touching the arms at the sides, the shoulders, the head balanced on top. And again, just rest the attention behind the eyes. From that point behind the eyes, just try to feel the outline of the sitting body. Just the general sense of those different body areas, the head on top, arms and hands at the sides and middle, feet and buttocks underneath. Just try to hold that kind of silhouette or outline of the sitting body in the mind's eye. Feeling those different sensations. And then begin some deep, slow breathing, like we were doing during the yoga. It'll take about 3 seconds to expand the abdomen, rib cage, and chest. Hold the air in the lungs. 2 or 3 seconds. Feel the subtle sensation. And feel the relaxing contractions of the out breath. Try to feel the last bit of air go out of the lung. Just take several more deep, slow breaths like that, cultivating this basic present moment awareness. And breathing in, letting go of the past and future. And breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, letting go of the past and future. Breathing out, sitting here and now. Breathing in, feeling the whole body. Breathing out, feeling the whole body. Try to take a few more deep, slow breaths like that. Feeling the whole in-breath from beginning to end. And the whole out-breath from beginning to end. It's the rise and fall of the in-breath. The rise and fall of the out-breath. It's the beginning and the end of each breath. When you get tired of doing the deeper breathing on an out breath, let the controlled breathing go. Just let the breathing return to its uncontrolled or shorter, irregular rhythm. But continue to feel it. Just keep the attention focused there in the center of the body. Try to feel the sensations of the clothing rubbing against the skin of the stomach, rib cage, or chest. As it expands and contracts. Just knowing when the breath is coming in. Knowing when the breath is going out. You know it by feeling it. Or you might feel some first part of the breath moving through the nostrils, the second part of the breath, sensations in the abdomen or chest. Just try to pay particular attention to the starting of the breath and the end of the in-breath. Starting of the out-breath and the end of the out-breath. Just be like a scientist sitting in the laboratory looking down to the microscope. Concentrated awareness is the microscope. Notice a subtle movement. And even within one in-breath, you might notice a couple of different movements, 3 or 4 different movements within one in-breath. On the out-breath, you may feel 2 or 3 or 4 smaller contractions. within the one out breath. Just develop this concentration, this applied and sustained attention to the breathing process. While you're developing this perception of impermanence, you might notice the thoughts coming and going in the mind, which are also impermanent. You might notice other body sensations, like some itch, prickling sensation, touch of clothing on the skin. It's also just come and go. Keep that impermanence of the breathing process, the arising and vanishing, the in-breath and out-breath. There in the center, and the peripheral awareness. You can notice other sensations in the background, coming and going, or even the sounds of this voice. Each syllable is coming and going. Stay focused, turning up the power of the mental microscope. Make those comings and goings clear. Even if something appears to last, it's changing. You may not see it clearly. If your concentration is good enough, the mind is calm enough, so be aware of the five aggregates, the impermanence of the five aggregates, material vibration, pleasant or painful feeling, perception, mind recognizing object. Or any thoughts about them, reaction. Or any thoughts of I, me, or mine. Ego consciousness. The mind is clinging to any objects. Notice that clinging. Clinging obscures the flow of impermanence. There's too many thoughts. Take some deep, slow breaths to help stay more grounded in the material vibrations of the body. Breathing in, sitting. Breathing out, sitting. Sensations arising and vanishing. Pleasure, pain coming and going. Perceptions, thoughts, urges coming and going. Thoughts of I, me, or mine coming and going. This is all just a continuous flow and flux, impermanent of the five aggregates, arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. Moments of feeling, hearing, thinking, arising and vanishing, quick succession. If painful sensations arise in the body, you can also focus on those sensations, see how it's just atoms and molecules or cells vibrating, producing sensations coming and going. It's not one static sensation. It's impermanent. Keep turning up the power of the mental microscope to notice more and subtler sensations, sounds, thoughts, arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing, arising and vanishing. Breath by breath, moment by moment. Or is there anything that lasts for more than just a brief moment? from the moment of birth, even from the moment of conception to the moment of death, this process of impermanence. It's been going on and on, non-stop. Baby is born from a one cell. Impermanence evolves into billions of cells. And the decay process keeps on impermanence until it comes to deterioration, death. And the flow of sensory stimulation, sounds going through the ear, visible objects through the mind, smells, tastes, body sensations, pleasure and pain, continual non-stop flow of impermanent. Even the sound is continually changing from the moment it was struck. It's fading away. Sabbe sankhara anicchati yada panyaya pasati atanabindati dukhi Esamango visu. All conditioned things, the five aggregates of this body, mind, and world are impermanent. They're continually arising and vanishing through the senses. When one sees this with the eye of wisdom, knowledge of rise and fall, one becomes disenchanted with suffering. This is the path to purity, to freedom. Thus spoke the Buddha. Now we'll finish the meditation. I invite you to join in chanting the word sadhu 3 times slowly. We do the chanting on a long out breath. Take a deep in breath. Sadhu. Sadhu. Now place the hands at the edge of the knees. Take one more deep, slow breath. As you breathe in, stretch the head back. Pull the hands against the knees to arch the lower spine. Lift the head up on an in breath. On the out breath, press the chin to the top of the chest. Stretch the neck vertebra. Lift the chin up level on an in breath. And relax on the out breath. Put a smile on your face. Okay, friends. So this brings our evening to an end, and I hope you're able to tune in a little bit to feel that flow of impermanence through your body and mind. So, if you're interested in cultivating that, I would suggest during this week, try to make that the focus of your meditation. Of course, in the beginning, you need to spend the first part of the meditation period just learning how to develop mindfulness of the breathing and to relax the body and mind before more intently focusing on the impermanence, weakening the hindrances to some extent. Okay? I think you can do that. And reread the that attachment that I sent out on the 8 insight knowledges. There's a lot of the good information in that. And then we'll carry on next week with going over some of the other following insight knowledges. Okay, so mindfulness a day keeps dukkha away. Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya.
Namo Buddhaya, Bhante. Thank you, Bhante.
Namo Buddhaya. Thank you, Bhante.